The moment Samuel Sullivan saw the dark shape lying in the snowy field between his ranch and the trading post, he knew something was terribly wrong because nothing living should be that still in weather this bitter. He urged his horse forward through the December wind that cut across Wyoming territory like 1,000 knives, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air of 1876. The storm had blown through Shoshone City 3 days ago, leaving behind drifts that reached his knees in places, and a cold so profound it seemed to settle into his very bones. Samuel had been riding fence line when he spotted it, this crumpled form that might have been a fallen animal, except for the unmistakable shape of human limbs. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his boots crunching through the crusted snow as he ran toward what he now saw was a woman, her lips blue and her skin pale as the snow surrounding her. She wore only a thin coat, completely inadequate for Wyoming winter, and her dark hair had frozen into stiff strands against her face. "Madam," he said urgently, dropping to his knees beside her and pressing his fingers against her throat. He felt it then, the faintest flutter of pulse, so weak he almost missed it. She was alive barely, and he knew he had minutes at most to save her. Samuel was a large man, standing over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders built from years of ranch work, and he lifted her with ease despite his own exhaustion from the morning's labor. She weighed almost nothing, as if the cold had already begun claiming parts of her. He wrapped her in his own coat before mounting his horse and positioning her in front of him, holding her against his chest as he kicked the animal into a gallop back toward his ranch house. The ride felt like it took hours, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. Samuel kept talking to the unconscious woman, saying anything to fill the silence that felt too much like death. "Stay with me now. You are going to be fine. My house is warm. I have got blankets and a fire. Just hold on." His ranch house was modest, but well built, constructed of solid timber with a stone fireplace that could heat the main room to almost uncomfortable temperatures. Samuel had built it himself over the course of 2 years, back when he still had hoped that his life might include more than just cattle and solitude. He was 32 now, and that hope had faded into a dull acceptance that some men were meant to live alone. He kicked the door open and carried the woman inside, laying her on the bearskin rug in front of the fireplace. The embers from his morning fire still glowed, and he quickly added wood and stirred them to life. Within minutes, flames were crackling and spreading warmth through the room. Samuel knew about cold. He had seen men lose fingers and toes to frostbite, had pulled a friend from a frozen river once only to watch him die from the shock of it. He stripped the woman's wet clothes off with clinical efficiency, trying not to think about impropriety when her life hung in the balance. Her skin was ice cold, her lips nearly purple, and he could barely detect her breathing. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned and laid her as close to the fire as he dared, then set water to heat on the stove. He had heard once that you should never warm a frozen person too quickly, that it could kill them as surely as the cold itself, so he worked methodically and carefully. He warmed towels by the fire and laid them gently against her skin, replacing them as they cooled. He managed to get small sips of warm water between her lips, praying she would swallow reflexively. For 3 hours he worked, never leaving her side, watching for any sign that she might be returning to the world or slipping away from it. The sun was setting, painting the snow-covered landscape outside his window in shades of orange and pink, when her eyelids finally fluttered. Samuel leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, and he found himself looking into irises the color of warm honey. She blinked several times, confusion crossing her face as she tried to focus on him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Do not try to talk yet," Samuel said gently. "You were frozen in the field. I brought you to my ranch. You are safe now." She swallowed with visible difficulty and tried again. This time her voice emerged, barely more than a whisper. "How long? I found you about 3 hours ago." "You have been unconscious the whole time." She closed her eyes, and for a moment he feared she had slipped away again, but then she spoke. "Thank you. You saved my life. What happened? How did you end up out there?" A single tear slid down her cheek, disappearing into the blanket. "My husband died 2 weeks ago. Influenza. We were traveling to his brother's ranch near here. I was trying to walk the rest of the way, but the storm came up so fast. I got turned around. I could not find the road." "I am sorry for your loss," Samuel said, and he meant it. He saw the grief in her eyes, raw and fresh. "I have nothing left," she said quietly. "No money. No family except his brother, and I have never met him. I do not even know if he will take me in. I have nothing to offer anyone." "You are alive," Samuel said firmly. "That is something." She looked at him for a long moment, studying his face in the firelight. He was not a handsome man by conventional standards, his features too rough and weathered by wind and sun. But his eyes were kind, and his hands had been gentle when he cared for her. She saw the gray beginning to show at his temples, the lines around his eyes from squinting at distant horizons, the strength in his shoulders. "What is your name?" she asked. "Samuel Sullivan. This is my ranch about 5 miles south of Shoshone City." "I am Theresa Emerson," she said. "I was Theresa Walsh until 2 months ago, married for such a short time." Her voice broke slightly. 43 days. That is how long I had with him before the fever took him." Samuel felt an unexpected surge of anger at the unfairness of it. This woman who looked to be in her middle 20s, her whole life ahead of her, already a widow and nearly frozen to death in a field. "You must be hungry. Let me make you something to eat." He prepared a simple meal of broth and bread, nothing that would shock her system after her ordeal. She struggled to sit up, and he helped her, propping pillows behind her back. She was still wrapped in blankets, and he had laid her dried clothes near the fire, though they had been so threadbare. He doubted they would provide much warmth or protection even once they were dry. As she sipped the broth, color slowly returned to her cheeks. Samuel sat in his chair near the fire, giving her space but staying close enough to help if she needed it. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, just the quiet of two people who had been alone long enough to appreciate simple presence. "You said you were trying to reach your husband's brother," Samuel said finally. "What is his name? I might know him." "Patrick Walsh. He has a ranch somewhere near here. That is all I know." Thomas, my husband, had not seen his brother in 5 years. They had some falling out, but it was the only place I could think to go. Samuel shook his head. "I do not know anyone by that name, but I can ask in town. Someone will know him." Theresa set down the cup, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at Samuel with an intensity that caught him off guard. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you married? Do you have a wife who will mind that I am here?" "No wife." "I had a woman I meant to marry once, but that was 6 years ago. She decided ranch life was not for her and went back east. There has been no one since." She nodded slowly, as if making some decision in her mind. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. "I owe you my life. Without you, I would have died in that field. I have no way to repay you. I have nothing. No money, no possessions except those rags I was wearing. If I find Patrick Walsh, he may not want me. Even if he does, he is a stranger. I would be at his mercy." "You do not owe me anything," Samuel said. "Anyone would have done the same. But you are the one who did it," she said quietly. "Samuel Sullivan, I am going to say something improper. I have spent the last 2 weeks grieving and afraid and alone. I loved my husband, but he is gone and I am here and I need to survive. I can cook and clean. I can mend and sew. I worked in my father's store before I married, so I know accounts. I am healthy when I am not half frozen. I can work hard. I am yours if you want me." Samuel stared at her, certain he had misheard. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I will marry you if you will have me. I know it is improper and too fast. I know I am still grieving my husband. But I also know that I am alone in the world and you saved my life and you seem like a good man. That is more than many women have when they marry. I will be a good wife to you. I will try to make you happy. All I ask is a home and safety." "Miss Emerson," Samuel began, but she interrupted him. "I know what you are going to say. You are going to say it is too soon, that I should wait, that I do not know you. You are right about all of it. But I also know what the world is like for a woman alone with no money and no prospects. I know what could happen to me. And I know that when you carried me in here, you were gentle. When you undressed me, you did not linger or take advantage. When you fed me, your hands were steady and kind. A woman could do much worse." Samuel felt something shift in his chest, some wall he had built over the last 6 years beginning to crack. He had been lonely for so long he had almost forgotten what it felt like to want companionship. He looked at Theresa Emerson, this widow who had nearly died in his field, and he saw not desperation but fierce determination to survive. "You are grieving," he said carefully. "You have been through something terrible. You should take time to heal before you make decisions like this." "Time is a luxury I cannot afford," she said. "But if you do not want me, I understand. You can take me to town and I will find work somehow. I will not impose on your kindness any longer than necessary." "I did not say I did not want you," Samuel said, the words coming out before he could think better of them. "I just want to make sure you know what you are choosing." "I am choosing life," Theresa said simply. "I am choosing a chance. If you are willing to give me that, I will spend the rest of my days being grateful for it." Samuel stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The moon was rising, full and bright, turning the world silver. He thought about the years he had spent alone in this house, the conversations he had with his horse because there was no one else to talk to, the meals eaten in silence, the cold bed, and the emptiness that had become his constant companion. He turned back to face her. "If we do this, we do it right. We wait until you are recovered. We get married proper by a preacher. I will court you even if it is quick. I want you to be sure." Theresa smiled for the first time, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "I am already sure." "Well, I need time to be sure," Samuel said, though he knew it was already too late. Something had hooked itself into his heart the moment he saw her lying in that field, and it had only sunk deeper as he worked to save her life. "You can stay here in my room. I will sleep in the barn." "Do not be ridiculous," Theresa said. "It is freezing out there. This is your house. I will sleep here by the fire. I am very comfortable." They compromised, with Samuel taking blankets to the small spare room he used for storage while Theresa remained by the fire. Before he left her, he added more wood to keep the flames going through the night. "Samuel," she called as he reached the door. He turned back. "Thank you for everything." "Get some rest," he said. "We will figure everything out in the morning." But sleep did not come easily for Samuel that night. He lay in the darkness, listening to the wind outside and thinking about the woman in his front room. Part of him wondered if he was being a fool, if she was simply using him for security, and would leave the moment something better came along. But another part, the part that had felt her weak pulse under his fingers and seen the determination in her eyes, believed that she meant what she said. He thought about his parents, who had loved each other deeply until fever took his mother when Samuel was 18. His father had survived only 2 years after that, seeming to lose the will to live without his wife beside him. Samuel had always wanted that kind of love, that kind of partnership. His previous engagement had been practical, based on mutual loneliness rather than genuine feeling, and perhaps that was why she had left. But this was different. Theresa had offered herself with complete honesty. There were no illusions between them, no pretty lies about love at first sight. She needed security and he needed companionship. It was a trade, but somehow it felt more honest than anything he had experienced before. When morning came, Samuel found Theresa already awake, dressed in her dried clothes despite their poor condition. She had somehow managed to wash her face and comb her hair with her fingers, and she had rebuilt the fire. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you do not mind. I found your kitchen. I made coffee." The smell of it filled the room, rich and welcome. Samuel realized with a start that this was the first time in 6 years someone else had been in his house in the morning, the first time he had woken to coffee already made and a fire already burning. "I do not mind at all," he said. They shared breakfast, a simple meal of cornmeal mush and bacon, but to Samuel it felt almost festive. Theresa moved around his kitchen with confidence, finding what she needed and working efficiently despite being in an unfamiliar space. She asked him about his ranch, about the cattle and the land, and she listened with genuine interest as he described his operation. "How many head do you run?" she asked. "About 200 right now. It is not a huge operation, but it is enough to make a living. I sell beef to the army at Fort Washakie and to some of the mining camps. In good years, I do well enough. And in bad years, we get by. I do most of the work myself. I hire help for roundup and branding, but otherwise it is just me." "That seems like a lot for one person." "It is," Samuel admitted, "but I manage." Theresa was quiet for a moment. "If I stayed, I could help. Not with the cattle, I know nothing about that, but with everything else. The house, the garden in summer, the chickens if you have them, cooking and mending. All the things that take time away from your real work." "I do not have chickens," Samuel said. "I always meant to get some, but it seemed like too much trouble for just me." "We should get chickens," Theresa said, then stopped, her cheeks coloring slightly. "I am sorry, I am being presumptuous." "You have not agreed to anything yet." Samuel set down his coffee cup and looked at her directly. "Theresa, I think you should know something about me. I do not make hasty decisions usually. I think things through, plan carefully, but sometimes life does not give you the luxury of time. My father taught me that you have to recognize opportunity when it comes, even if it arrives in an unexpected form." "Are you saying I am an opportunity?" she asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I am saying that I am 32 years old and I have been alone long enough. I am saying that you are right about us both being honest about what this is. I am saying that if you mean what you said, if you truly want to build a life here, then yes, I want that too." Theresa's smile widened. "Then we have an agreement." "Not quite yet," Samuel said. "First, we need to at least try to find your brother-in-law. You deserve to know if he would take you in to have that choice." "I already know my choice," Theresa said, "but if it will make you feel better, we can look for him." That afternoon, Samuel hitched his wagon and they drove into Shoshone City together. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with shops and businesses serving the ranchers and miners in the area. The wind had died down, but the cold remained fierce, and Theresa huddled under the blankets Samuel had provided, her thin coat inadequate against the weather. Their first stop was the general store, where Samuel introduced Theresa to Harold and Martha Green, the proprietors. Martha's eyes widened with curiosity at seeing Samuel with a woman, but she was too polite to ask questions directly. "We are looking for a rancher named Patrick Walsh," Samuel said. "Would you know of him? Harold scratched his beard thoughtfully. Walsh, Walsh. That name does ring a bell. Martha, did we not have a Walsh come through here about a year back? Martha nodded. We did. Patrick Walsh. He bought supplies, said he had a place up north of here. But Harold, did you not hear that he sold out and left? Moved to Montana, I think. His ranch was not prospering. Samuel glanced at Theresa, who had gone very still. Are you certain? He asked. Pretty certain, Harold said. Though you could check with the land office, they would know for sure. The land office confirmed it. Patrick Walsh had sold his property 8 months earlier and departed the territory. There was no forwarding address, no way to contact him. Theresa's last potential refuge had vanished. As they stood outside the land office, Theresa looked up at Samuel. Well, that settles that, I suppose. I am sorry, Samuel said. I know you hoped. Did I? Theresa asked quietly. I am not sure I did. I think I was hoping that it would be impossible to find him, if I am being honest. That makes me a terrible person, does it not? It makes you human, Samuel said. Come on. We have one more stop to make. He drove the wagon to the small church at the end of the main street, a white clapboard building with a simple cross above the door. Reverend Thomas Morrison was inside, preparing for the Sunday service. He was a round man in his 50s with a kind face and gentle manner. Samuel Sullivan, he said warmly, I have not seen you at service in some time. I know, Reverend, I apologize. The ranch keeps me busy. It always does, Reverend Morrison said without judgment. Then he noticed Theresa and his eyebrows rose slightly. And who is this? This is Miss Theresa Emerson, Samuel said. She is a widow. Her husband died recently. She was traveling to find family but ended up on my ranch instead. The Reverend's expression softened. I am so sorry for your loss, my dear. How can I help you? Samuel took a breath. We would like you to marry us, Reverend. If the request surprised Reverend Morrison, he hid it well. He looked between them carefully. This is quite sudden, is it not? How long have you known each other? Since yesterday, Samuel admitted. I know how it sounds, but we are both adults. We have talked honestly about what we want. We understand what we are doing. Do you? The Reverend asked gently. Marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly. Miss Emerson, you are grieving your husband. Are you certain this is what you want, or are you simply afraid and seeking security? Theresa met his gaze steadily. I am both grieving and seeking security, Reverend. I will not lie about that, but I am also choosing life over despair. Samuel is a good man. I believe we can build something real together, even if it does not start with grand passion. Is that not how many marriages begin? Reverend Morrison sighed. You are not wrong. I have married many couples whose unions were arranged for practical reasons, and some of them have found great happiness. But I must ask you both to wait. A week at least. If you still feel the same way 7 days from now, I will perform the ceremony. A week, Samuel repeated. 7 days to make sure this is truly what you both want. It is not so much to ask, is it? If you are certain, then the wait will not matter. And if doubt creeps in, better to discover it now than after vows have been spoken. Samuel looked at Theresa, who nodded slightly. 7 days, he agreed. As they drove back to the ranch, snow began falling again, light flakes that drifted lazily from a gray sky. Theresa watched the landscape pass, this harsh, beautiful country that would be her home. Are you having second thoughts? Samuel asked. No, she said. Are you? No. Then we will wait 7 days and prove to the Reverend that we know our own minds. Those 7 days became something neither of them expected. Samuel courted Theresa in his own way, teaching her about the ranch and his life. He took her to check on the cattle, bundled in his spare coat, which was far too large for her but infinitely warmer than her own. She watched as he broke ice in the water troughs and counted heads, making sure none of the animals had wandered off or gotten into trouble. Theresa proved her worth quickly. She cleaned the ranch house from top to bottom, organized his chaotic kitchen, and mended the pile of clothes he had been ignoring for months. She cooked meals that were far better than anything he had managed on his own, making do with his limited supplies and promising to create wonders once she could get to the store properly. They talked during those long winter evenings, sharing stories of their lives. Theresa told him about growing up in Ohio, the daughter of a storekeeper, how she had met Thomas Walsh when he came through town with a cattle drive. He had been handsome and charming, full of dreams about the West, and she had fallen hard and fast. "He was not practical," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. "He had grand ideas but no real plan. When his money ran out, he took work where he could find it, but he was not strong enough for ranch work and not skilled enough for anything else. Then the fever hit him and there was no money for a doctor. I watched him die over 3 days, burning up with heat while I could do nothing but try to keep him comfortable." "That must have been terrible," Samuel said quietly. "It was. But you know what the worst part was?" "I was sad, truly sad, but I was also angry. Angry that he had brought me out here with no plan, that he had promised me a life he could not deliver, that he left me alone. I felt guilty for being angry at a dead man." "Anger is part of grief," Samuel said. "My mother died of fever too. I was angry at her for leaving, angry at God for taking her, angry at myself for not being able to save her. It does not mean you did not love your husband. Thank you for saying that." Samuel shared his own history, about growing up on this land his father had claimed, about building the ranch slowly over years of hard work. He told her about Elizabeth, the woman he had planned to marry, how she had seemed to want the same things he did, until she actually experienced the isolation and hard work of ranch life. "She lasted 6 months," he said. "Then one day she told me she could not do it, could not live so far from everything, could not handle the wind and the cold and the loneliness. She left on the next stage east and I never heard from her again." "You still love her?" Theresa asked. "No," Samuel said honestly. "I am not sure I ever really did. I think we were both just tired of being alone and mistook convenience for love." "Is that what we are doing?" Theresa asked. "Mistaking convenience for something more?" Samuel considered the question carefully. "I do not think so. We are not pretending this is something it is not. We are being honest about what we need and what we can offer each other. Maybe that is a better foundation than false romance." On the 4th day, Samuel drove Theresa into town and bought her proper winter clothes, a warm wool coat and sturdy boots, plus fabric for new dresses. She protested the expense, but he insisted, and he saw the relief in her eyes at having garments that would actually protect her from the weather. Martha Green cornered Theresa in the store while Samuel was discussing supplies with Harold. "My dear," she said kindly, "I do not mean to pry, but are you certain about this? Samuel is a good man, but you hardly know him." "I know that he saved my life," Theresa said. "I know that he has been nothing but kind and respectful. I know that he needs someone and I need somewhere to belong. That seems like enough to build on." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You are braver than I was at your age. My marriage was arranged by my father. I did not meet Harold until our wedding day, but it has been a good marriage, 32 years now. Sometimes love grows from small seeds. I hope it does for you." By the 7th day, Samuel found that he was no longer thinking of Theresa as a stranger he was helping, but as someone who belonged in his house and his life. He woke each morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of her moving about the kitchen. He came in from his work to find his house warm and welcoming, to conversation and company. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long had lifted, and he realized he did not want it to return. That evening, as they sat by the fire, he asked her directly, "Has this week changed your mind? You can still say no. I will take you to town, help you find respectable work. You do not have to marry me if you do not want to." Theresa set down the shirt she was mending and looked at him. "This week has only made me more certain. You are a good man, Samuel Sullivan. You are kind and hardworking and honest. I respect you. I like you. Is that love? Not yet, but I think it could become love if we let it. Do you want to let it?" Samuel felt something warm unfold in his chest. "Yes," he said, "I do." "Then ask me properly," Theresa said with a slight smile. "I may be a practical woman marrying for practical reasons, but I would still like to be asked." Samuel crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were small and work-worn, but they fit perfectly in his palm. "Theresa Emerson, will you marry me? I cannot promise you an easy life, but I promise to work hard to provide for you. I cannot promise you grand romance, but I promise to treat you with respect and kindness. I promise to be faithful and honest, to stand beside you in whatever comes. Will you be my wife?" Theresa smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you, and I promise the same things to you. I will work hard, be faithful, stand beside you. I will try to make you happy." "You already do," Samuel said, and realized it was true. The next day they returned to town and found Reverend Morrison. True to his word, he agreed to perform the ceremony that very afternoon. Martha and Harold Green served as witnesses, and the small group gathered in the church as snow fell softly outside. Theresa wore a simple dress of dark blue that Martha had loaned her, and Samuel wore his best clothes, his hair combed back and his boots polished. As they stood before the altar and spoke their vows, Samuel found himself meaning every word with an intensity that surprised him. This woman who had come into his life so suddenly had somehow become essential to it. When Reverend Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Theresa gently, respectfully, and felt her respond with equal care. They were married now, bound together by law and God and their own honest promises. That night back at the ranch, there was an awkwardness between them that had not existed before. They were married now, which came with certain expectations, but they were still near strangers in many ways. Theresa stood by the fire, nervous energy in her posture. Samuel came to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that we do not have to rush anything. This is a marriage, but it is also a partnership. We can take our time getting to know each other properly." Theresa turned to look at him, grateful for his consideration. "Thank you. I do want to be a proper wife to you, but I need time. Is that all right?" "It is more than all right," Samuel said. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We have time. We have all the time we need." That night, they shared a bed for the first time, but only for warmth and companionship. Samuel held Theresa carefully, and she rested her head against his shoulder, and they talked quietly in the darkness about small things and large ones, until they both drifted into sleep. The winter deepened around them as January gave way to February. Samuel taught Theresa how to ride a horse properly, and she proved a quick learner. He showed her the boundaries of his land, the hidden valleys and the high meadows that would be green in summer. She learned to help him feed the cattle and check the water supply, though he never asked her to do the heavy work. Theresa transformed the ranch house into a real home. She made curtains from the fabric Samuel bought her, planted herb seeds in pots by the window for spring, and generally brought life and warmth to spaces that had been merely functional before. She also proved to be an excellent manager of their resources, keeping careful track of supplies and money in a way Samuel had never bothered with. They developed routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and moods. Samuel discovered that Theresa sang while she worked, soft melodies that filled the house with music. Theresa learned that Samuel was quietest in the mornings, needing time to wake fully before conversation, but that he became more talkative as the day progressed. Slowly, carefully, they began to bridge the gap between practical partnership and genuine intimacy. It started with small touches, Samuel's hand on her back as he passed behind her, Theresa's fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee. Then came longer moments, sitting close together by the fire, Samuel reading aloud from a book while Theresa sewed, her shoulder pressed against his. One evening in late February, after a particularly hard day when Samuel had been forced to pull a cow from a snowdrift, Theresa tended his chapped hands with salve, her touch gentle and careful. She held his rough palms in hers, working the medicine into his cracked skin, and Samuel felt something shift between them. "Theresa," he said softly, and she looked up at him. He saw something in her eyes that had not been there before, a warmth and openness that went beyond gratitude or practical affection. "Yes," she whispered. Instead of answering with words, he leaned forward and kissed her, properly this time with feeling. She responded immediately, her arms coming up around his neck as she pressed closer to him. The kiss deepened, and Samuel felt desire stir alongside the affection and respect he had already developed for her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Theresa smiled. "I was wondering when that would happen." "Was I too slow?" Samuel asked with a slight grin. "Maybe a little," she teased. "But I appreciate that you gave me time. I think I am ready now, ready to be your wife in every way." That night marked a true beginning for them, the consummation of their marriage, but also something deeper. What had started as a practical arrangement was transforming into genuine love. They made love slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies with the same care they had taken to learn each other's minds and hearts. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the warmth of their bed, Samuel held Theresa close and marveled at how his life had changed. 2 months ago he had been alone, resigned to a solitary existence. Now he had a wife, a true partner, and the beginnings of real happiness. "I love you," he said, the words emerging unbidden but absolutely true. "I did not expect to, but I do." Theresa tilted her head back to look at him, her eyes shining in the moonlight that filtered through the window. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was just being grateful or practical." "Are you grateful?" Samuel asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "But grateful and loving are not mutually exclusive. You saved my life, Samuel, but you also gave me a reason to want to live it. That is worth more than I can ever say." Spring came late to Wyoming, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape from stark white to vibrant green almost overnight. The snow melted in rushing streams, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and new calves dotted the fields. Samuel and Theresa worked side by side through calving season, and she proved herself capable and unafraid of the hard work. In April, Theresa realized she was pregnant. She waited a week to be certain before telling Samuel, and when she did, he lifted her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Theresa asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl? Does it matter?" "Not even a little bit," Samuel said and kissed her soundly. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and summer. Theresa bloomed with it, her face fuller and more radiant than Samuel had ever seen it. He became protective almost to the point of being overbearing, trying to prevent her from doing any work he deemed too strenuous. But she laughed at him and kept doing what needed to be done. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time," she reminded him. "I am not fragile." "I know," Samuel said, "but I cannot help worrying. You are precious to me." "And you are precious to me," Theresa said, taking his hand and placing it over the swell of her belly where their child grew. "But you have to trust that I know my own limits." They made preparations through the summer, Samuel building a cradle from smooth pine wood, and Theresa sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Martha Green threw Theresa a small celebration at the general store, inviting the ranch wives from the area. Theresa had made friends among them over the months, and she was touched by their generosity and support. The baby came in December, almost exactly 1 year after Samuel had found Theresa frozen in the field. Labor started early in the morning and progressed quickly. Samuel rode hard for town to fetch the midwife, an experienced woman named Ellen who had delivered most of the babies in the area. Samuel paced outside the bedroom while Ellen and Martha worked with Theresa. He heard her cries of pain and felt helpless, wishing he could take the burden from her. But when Ellen finally emerged, smiling, and said, "You have a son, and your wife did beautifully," all the worry melted into pure joy. He went into the room to find Theresa tired but glowing, holding a small bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. Samuel approached quietly, awed by the sight of his wife and child. "Come meet your son," Theresa said softly. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small snuffling sounds. His eyes were closed, his little fists clenched. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered. "He is," Theresa agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Samuel thought for a moment, then said, "James, after my father, James Sullivan, if that is all right with you." "James," Theresa repeated, smiling. "It is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to your home." Samuel carefully took his son into his arms, marveling at how small and fragile he felt, yet how solid and real. This was his child, his and Theresa's, a life they had created together. The magnitude of it overwhelmed him. "I promise to protect you," he said to the baby, "to teach you and guide you, to love you and your mother with everything I have." "You already do," Theresa said, reaching out to touch his hand. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a healthy baby with powerful lungs, and he kept them both busy. Samuel discovered a capacity for patience and tenderness he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with his crying son in the middle of the night, singing off-key lullabies until James finally settled. Theresa recovered her strength quickly and fell into the rhythms of motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else. She nursed James while managing the household and still finding time to help Samuel with ranch work when needed. They were a true partnership now in every sense of the word. As spring approached again, Samuel stood at the window one morning, watching Theresa in the yard with James bundled against her chest. She was scattering feed for the chickens they had finally gotten, laughing as the birds flocked around her feet. The morning sun lit her hair and made her smile incandescent. He thought back to that day he had found her in the field, more dead than alive, and he marveled at the strange ways fate worked. If he had ridden a different direction that morning, if the snow had covered her completely, if he had not seen that dark shape in the white expanse, none of this would exist. He would still be alone, and Theresa would be dead, and little James would never have been born. But he had found her, and she had lived, and she had offered herself to him with brutal honesty. They had built something real and lasting from the most unlikely foundation, turned desperation and loneliness into love and family. Theresa looked up and saw him watching. She smiled and he waved back, his heart full to overflowing. That evening, after James was asleep in his cradle and they sat together by the fire, Theresa said, "Do you ever regret it? Taking me in, marrying me so quickly?" Samuel pulled her closer against his side. "Not for one single moment. Do you?" "Never," she said firmly. "I think about that day sometimes, lying in the snow, so cold I could not feel my body anymore. I remember thinking that maybe it would be easier to just let go, to stop fighting, but something in me would not give up. I kept thinking, just a little further, just keep moving, and then you found me." "I am glad you kept fighting," Samuel said. "I am glad you survived. I am glad you said those words to me when you woke up." "I meant them," Theresa said. "Even then, barely knowing you, I meant them. And I mean them even more now. I am yours, Samuel Sullivan, and you are mine, and nothing is ever going to change that." "Nothing," Samuel agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss. The years flowed by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. James grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy with his mother's amber eyes and his father's solid build. 2 years after his birth, Theresa gave birth to a daughter they named Lucy, a quieter child but equally beloved. 3 years after that came another son, Michael, who proved to be the most mischievous of the three. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Samuel expanded his herd and acquired more land, building the operation into one of the more successful in the area. Theresa kept meticulous records and proved to have a head for business, negotiating better prices and keeping careful track of their finances. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and secure. More importantly, they were happy. The love that had grown from such unlikely seeds had deepened into something unshakable, the kind of partnership that weathered storms both literal and figurative. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Theresa back to the field where he had found her. It was summer now, the field covered in tall grass and wildflowers rather than snow. They walked hand in hand to the spot, Samuel having marked it in his memory all those years ago. "Right here," he said. "This is where you were lying." Theresa looked around at the beautiful landscape, so different from that frozen winter day. "It seems impossible now, like it happened to different people." "In a way it did," Samuel said. "We are not the same people we were then. That desperate widow and lonely rancher do not exist anymore. We are something new, something we built together." "Something better," Theresa agreed. She turned to face him fully. "Thank you, Samuel, for saving me, for giving me a chance, for loving me when I did not even love myself." "Thank you for saying yes," Samuel replied. "For staying, for building this life with me. You saved me too, Theresa. I just did not realize I needed saving until you arrived." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the field that had brought them together, surrounded by the evidence of life and growth and beauty. In the distance, they could see their ranch house, smoke rising from the chimney, their children playing in the yard under the watchful eye of Martha Green, who had come to help for the day so Samuel and Theresa could have this time together. "Should we head back?" Theresa asked. "I am sure the children are wearing Martha out." "In a minute," Samuel said. "I just want to stand here with you a little longer, to remember and be grateful." "I am grateful too," Theresa said. "Every single day." As they finally walked back toward home, their hands linked together, Samuel reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. He thought about that bitter December day when he had almost ridden past, almost missed seeing that dark shape in the snow. He thought about how close Theresa had come to dying, how easily this entire future could have never happened. But it had happened. She had survived, they had found each other, and they had built something beautiful from the most desperate of beginnings. It had not been the romance of storybooks, with grand gestures and passionate declarations. It had been something quieter but no less profound, built on honesty and respect, and the daily choice to love each other even when it was hard. That night, after the children were in bed and Martha had been driven back to town, Samuel and Theresa sat on their porch and watched the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Theresa was resting her head on Samuel's shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them comfortable in the familiar embrace. "You ever think about what if?" Theresa asked quietly. "What if I had found Patrick Walsh instead? What if he had not sold his ranch and left?" "Sometimes," Samuel admitted, "but I do not think it would have worked out well for you. You did not know him. He might not have welcomed you, and then you and I would never have found each other." "I am glad we did," Theresa said. "Find each other, I mean. Even though it happened in such a terrible way, I cannot regret the outcome." "Neither can I," Samuel said. James called out from inside, having woken from a bad dream, and Theresa started to rise. "I will go," Samuel said, standing. "You rest." He went inside and climbed the ladder to the loft where the children slept. James was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. "Pa." "I am here, son." "Bad dream," James nodded. "I dreamed that you and Ma went away and did not come back." Samuel sat on the edge of the small bed and pulled his son into a hug. "That is not going to happen. Your mother and I are not going anywhere. We are right here and we always will be." "Promise?" James asked, his voice small. "I promise," Samuel said. "Now lay back down. Everything is all right." He stayed until James drifted back to sleep, then checked on Lucy and Michael, both sleeping soundly. Looking at his children, Samuel felt a wave of protectiveness and love so intense it was almost painful. These were his and Theresa's, proof of what they had built together. He went back outside to find Theresa had made tea. She handed him a cup and they sat in companionable silence for a while. "James had a nightmare," Samuel reported. "He is fine now." "He is sensitive," Theresa said, "like his father." "I am not sensitive," Samuel protested mildly. "You are," Theresa said with a smile. "You just hide it well, but I see it. The way you are with the children, the way you care for the animals, even the way you check the fences like you are worried they might be offended if you do not pay them enough attention." "Now you are just making fun of me," Samuel said, but he was smiling. "Maybe a little," Theresa admitted, "but I love that about you. You care deeply about everything and everyone in your world. It is one of the things that made me fall in love with you." "What were the other things?" Samuel asked, curious. Theresa thought for a moment. "Your hands. The first thing I really noticed about you after I woke up was your hands. They were so gentle when you cared for me, but I could see how strong they were too. Capable hands. Honest hands." "My hands," Samuel said, surprised. "Yes, and your voice. It was the first thing I heard, telling me I was going to be all right. I believed you. I do not know why, but I did. And your eyes. When you looked at me, I did not see pity or judgment. I just saw kindness." Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You saw more in me than I saw in myself." "We saved each other," Theresa said simply. "That is what I believe. You saved me from freezing, and I saved you from loneliness. We were both dying in different ways, and we gave each other a reason to truly live." "When did you get so wise?" Samuel asked. "I was always wise," Theresa said with mock seriousness. "You just took a while to notice." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet ranch. A coyote called in the distance, and Samuel's horse whinnied in response from the barn. The night wind carried the scent of sage and grass, familiar smells that meant home. "I should check on the cattle one more time before bed," Samuel said, though he made no move to get up. "They will be fine," Theresa said. "Stay here with me a little longer." "All right," Samuel agreed easily. The cattle could wait. His wife could not. They sat together until the moon rose full and bright, painting everything silver. It was the same moon that had been shining the night Samuel brought Theresa home, the night she had first said those words that changed everything. "I am yours if you want me." He had wanted her, had claimed her, and she had claimed him right back. They belonged to each other now, completely and irrevocably. It was the best decision either of them had ever made. As they finally went inside and prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routines of a long married couple, Samuel caught sight of their reflection in the window. Two figures moving in harmony, perfectly synchronized from years of practice. That was what they had become, he realized. Not two separate people sharing a space, but something unified and whole. They climbed into bed, and Theresa curled against him as she always did, fitting perfectly in the curve of his body. Samuel kissed the top of her head and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," she murmured back, already half asleep. Samuel lay awake a little longer, listening to her breathing deepen, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. He thought about the long journey that had brought them here, about the unlikely circumstances of their meeting, about the honest proposition she had made, and the leap of faith they had both taken. He thought about his children sleeping upstairs, about the ranch that provided for them, about the community they had become part of. He thought about Martha Green, who had become a true friend to them both, and about Reverend Morrison, who had married them despite his reservations, and now pointed to them as proof that practical marriages could become love matches. He thought about the future, about James learning to work the ranch, about Lucy's sharp mind and Michael's adventurous spirit, about grandchildren someday. He thought about growing old with Theresa, about facing whatever challenges came with her by his side. But mostly he thought about that moment in the field, that split second when he might have looked away, might have missed seeing her. How different everything would be if that moment had gone differently. How empty his life would still be. Thank God he had looked. Thank God she had fought to survive. Thank God she had been brave enough to say what she needed, and he had been brave enough to say yes. As Samuel finally drifted toward sleep, he felt profound gratitude for the strange and wonderful way his life had unfolded. He had set out that morning looking for broken fences and had found instead the one thing he had not known he needed most. He had found a partner, a wife, a love, a home in human form. He had found Theresa and she had found him, and together they had built something lasting and true. From desperate beginnings had come the deepest happiness. From honest practicality had grown the most profound love. It was not the story he would have written for himself, but it was better than anything he could have imagined. It was real and solid and good, built on hard work and honest affection and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. Samuel Sullivan fell asleep with his wife in his arms and peace in his heart, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, just as they always had. Just as they always would. The years continued their steady march. James grew tall and capable, becoming Samuel's right hand on the ranch. He had his father's work ethic and his mother's quick mind, and he showed every sign of being ready to take over the operation someday. Lucy became the best rider of the three children, fearless and skilled, and she helped her father train the horses they raised alongside the cattle. Michael, true to his mischievous nature, was always finding new ways to create chaos, but he had a gift with animals that made him invaluable when it came to dealing with difficult livestock. Samuel and Theresa watched their children grow with pride and occasional terror at how quickly time passed. It seemed like just yesterday James had been a baby in Theresa's arms, and now he was 16 and as tall as Samuel himself. Lucy was 13 and already breaking the hearts of the young men in the area, though she paid them no attention whatsoever. Michael was 10 and still young enough to think girls were a nuisance, which Samuel privately thought was wise. On a warm evening in June, with all 3 children off visiting friends in town and not expected back until the next day, Samuel and Theresa found themselves alone for the first time in months. They made the most of it, eating a simple dinner on the porch and then retiring early to bed, not to sleep but to enjoy each other's company without fear of interruption. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the fading light, Theresa traced patterns on Samuel's chest with her finger. "Do you realize we have been married 15 years? 16 in December," Samuel corrected. "December 12th. You remember the exact date?" "Of course I do. It is the most important date of my life except for the 11th when I found you." Theresa smiled. "I did not think you were the sentimental type when I first met you." "I was not," Samuel admitted. "You brought it out in me, along with a lot of other things I did not know I had in me, like what? Patience, tenderness, the ability to function on almost no sleep when we had 3 babies in 5 years." They both laughed at that. "But mostly, you taught me how to be happy. I did not realize how miserable I was before you came. I had just accepted it as normal." "I was not exactly joyful when you found me," Theresa pointed out. "I think we taught each other happiness. We built it together, piece by piece, day by day." "We did," Samuel agreed. He pulled her closer. "I want you to know something. If I could go back and change anything, I would not. Not even the hard parts, because it all led to this, and this is exactly where I want to be. Even the year the winter was so bad we lost 20 head of cattle." Theresa asked with a slight smile. "Even that?" "Even the year Michael broke his arm falling from the hayloft, and we thought we might lose him to infection. Even the drought 2 years ago. All of it. Because I got through all of it with you beside me, and that made it bearable." Theresa's eyes shimmered with tears. "You are being sentimental again." "I am," Samuel said unapologetically. "I have earned the right to be sentimental about my wife and family." "Yes, you have," Theresa agreed. She kissed him softly. "I love you, Samuel Sullivan, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "That is beautiful. Did you read that somewhere?" "No, I made it up just now. I am occasionally eloquent." "More than occasionally," Samuel said. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and when they woke the next morning to a house still empty of children, they made breakfast together and ate it slowly, savoring the rare quiet. Samuel found himself studying his wife as she moved around the kitchen, noting the silver threads in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the way her body had changed over the years of hard work and childbearing. She was even more beautiful to him now than she had been at 25. He had loved her then, but it had been a tentative, careful thing, not fully tested. Now, after 16 years of marriage, after weathering droughts and sickness and all the challenges that came with raising 3 children on a working ranch, his love for her was as solid and unshakable as the mountains in the distance. "You are staring at me," Theresa observed without turning around. "I am admiring my wife," Samuel corrected. "There is a difference." "And what are you admiring?" "Everything. The way you move. The way the morning light catches in your hair. The way you hum while you cook. The fact that you are still here after all these years, putting up with me and my stubborn ways." Theresa turned to face him, spatula in hand. "Your stubborn ways are nothing compared to mine. You are the one who has been putting up with me." "Then we are even," Samuel said. "We are," Theresa agreed. She set down the spatula and came to sit beside him. "Samuel, there is something I have been wanting to talk to you about." His heart clenched slightly at her serious tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" No, nothing is wrong, but I have been thinking about the future. James is getting old enough that he could manage things here if we needed him to. And I know the children will all be grown and gone before we know it. I want to make sure we have talked about what comes next, what we want from our later years. Samuel considered this. I have not thought much beyond getting through each season. What do you want? I want to travel a little, Theresa said. Not far, not for long, but I would like to see more of the territory. Maybe visit the hot springs up north that Martha is always talking about. Maybe go to Denver for a week and see the city. I want us to have experiences together that are not just work and worry. That sounds good, Samuel said slowly. I would like that too. I have been so focused on building this ranch and providing for the family that I have not thought about what comes after. But you are right. We should enjoy ourselves while we are still young enough. We are not that old, Theresa protested. You are only 48 and I am 41. We have years ahead of us. God willing, Samuel said. Then yes, let us plan some adventures. Small ones at first, just to make sure James can handle things on his own, but I like the idea of seeing new places with you. Theresa smiled. Good. Because I already talked to Martha about the hot springs and she says they are wonderful. We should go this fall after the cattle are sold. You had this all planned before you even talked to me, Samuel said with mock indignation. I knew you would say yes, Theresa said confidently. You always do when I really want something. That is because I am smart enough to know you are usually right, Samuel said. He pulled her into his lap. Besides, I like making you happy. You do make me happy, Theresa said seriously. Every day, even the hard days. Especially the hard days, because I know I do not have to face them alone. They sat like that for a while, just holding each other in the morning quiet, until they heard the wagon approaching and knew the children were home. They stood and composed themselves, putting on their parental faces, but Samuel caught Theresa's hand as they walked to the door. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For saying yes. 16 years ago when I asked you to marry me. For saying yes and staying and building this life with me. For everything. You saved my life, Theresa said. Everything after that was just me trying to make it worth saving. It was always worth saving, Samuel said firmly. You were always worth it. The wagon pulled up and the children spilled out, full of stories about their time in town and what they had seen and done. Samuel and Theresa listened and laughed and welcomed them home, slipping back into the familiar roles of mother and father. But Samuel carried with him the warmth of the morning's conversation. The reminder that his marriage was not just about the daily work of living but also about joy and connection, and looking forward to a future they would share. That fall, true to her word, Theresa organized a trip to the hot springs. James proved more than capable of managing the ranch with Lucy and Michael's help, and Samuel and Theresa set off in the wagon with light hearts and a sense of adventure. The hot springs were everything Martha had promised, natural pools of steaming water that eased the aches from years of hard work. Samuel and Theresa spent 3 glorious days there, soaking in the mineral-rich water, eating meals they did not have to cook themselves, and sleeping late without being woken by children or animals. On their last evening, they sat in one of the pools as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Theresa floated contentedly, her eyes closed, and Samuel watched her with a full heart. This was a good idea, he said. We should do this every year. Every year, Theresa agreed without opening her eyes. And next year we should go somewhere different, make it a tradition, see as much of this beautiful territory as we can. It is a deal, Samuel said. They returned to the ranch refreshed and energized, finding that everything had run smoothly in their absence. James beamed with pride at having proved himself capable, and Samuel clapped him on the shoulder in acknowledgement. "You did well, son. Your mother and I are proud of you." "Does this mean I can have more responsibility?" James asked hopefully. "It means we will talk about it," Samuel said. "You are growing up. It is time to start thinking about your future, about what you want from your life." "I want the ranch," James said without hesitation. "I want to do what you do, Pa. I cannot imagine anything else." Samuel felt a mixture of pride and slight concern. "The ranch will be yours someday, if that is what you truly want, but make sure you are choosing it because it is your dream, not just because it is mine." "It is my dream," James said firmly. "I love this land. I love the work. I want to build on what you and Ma created." That conversation marked a shift in their family dynamic. James began taking on more of the heavy responsibilities, and Samuel found himself able to step back slightly, to trust his son to handle things that he had always done himself. It was strange at first, but also liberating. He realized that part of providing for his family meant preparing them to eventually not need him, and James was proving himself ready for that responsibility. Lucy, meanwhile, announced that she wanted to become a veterinarian, an unusual ambition for a woman but not impossible. She had been reading every book she could find about animal medicine, and she had a natural gift for diagnosing and treating sick livestock. Samuel and Theresa agreed to support her dream, even though it would mean sending her away for education eventually. Michael, at 12, was still too young to know exactly what he wanted, but he showed signs of being interested in breeding horses, an area where the ranch could expand. Samuel began teaching him the finer points of bloodlines and conformation, and Michael absorbed the information like a sponge. As Samuel approached 50, he looked around at his family and his ranch and felt profound satisfaction. This life he and Theresa had built from such desperate beginnings had grown into something stable and strong. His children were healthy and capable. His marriage was solid and loving. His ranch was prosperous. He had everything he had ever wanted and more than he had ever dared hope for. On their 20th anniversary, Samuel took Theresa back to the field one more time. It had become a tradition of sorts, this pilgrimage to the place where their story began. They stood hand in hand in the summer grass, and Samuel said what he always said. "Right here, this is where everything changed. For both of us," Theresa added, as she always did. "You ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" Samuel asked. "I had almost decided to wait another day to check that fence line. If I had, you would have been buried under the snow." "But you did not wait," Theresa said. "You went out and you found me and you saved me. Some things are meant to be, Samuel. I truly believe that. We were meant to find each other." "I believe it too," Samuel said. He pulled her into his arms. 20 years. 2 decades. Half my life now has been with you." "The better half," Theresa said with a smile. "Definitely the better half," Samuel agreed. They kissed there in the field, two people who had grown old together, who had built something lasting and true. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel noticed Theresa had tears on her cheeks. "What is it?" he asked gently. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Theresa said. "I am just happy. So happy it overflows sometimes. I think about that woman you found here, so lost and afraid and alone. I barely recognize her now. You gave me a life I could never have imagined, Samuel. You gave me a home and a family and love. You gave me myself back when I thought I had lost everything." "You gave me just as much," Samuel said. "More, maybe. You gave me purpose and joy. You turned a house into a home. You gave me 3 amazing children. You stood beside me through everything. I am the one who should be grateful." "Then we are both grateful," Theresa said. "What a gift that is, to be grateful for each other after 20 years. They walked back to the ranch slowly, in no hurry, savoring the summer evening and each other's company. When they arrived, they found the house full of people. Martha and Harold Green were there, along with several other ranching families from the area. The children had organized a surprise party, complete with food and music, and a cake that Lucy had baked in secret. Samuel and Theresa were overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection from their community. These people who had become their friends over the years had all gathered to celebrate their anniversary, to honor the marriage that had become something of a local legend. "It gives us all hope," Martha said when she cornered Theresa later in the evening. "The way you two love each other. Seeing that it is possible to find happiness even when everything seems lost. You have no idea how many young couples I have counseled to be patient and work together, using you and Samuel as an example." "We are not perfect," Theresa protested. "We have had our struggles." "Of course you have," Martha said, "but you have weathered them together, and that is what matters. You have built something real and lasting, and that gives the rest of us hope that we can do the same." As the party wound down and the guests departed, Samuel stood on his porch with Theresa and watched the last wagon disappear down the road. The children had gone to bed, exhausted from the excitement of the day, and he and Theresa were alone again. "That was quite a surprise," Samuel said. "It was wonderful," Theresa agreed. "I had no idea they were planning it. The children must have been plotting for weeks. I am impressed they kept the secret." They went inside and prepared for bed, moving through their routines with the ease of long practice. When they finally lay down, Theresa curled against Samuel as she had every night for 20 years. 20 more years," she said quietly. "At least, that is what I want. 20 more years with you, and then 20 more after that." "I will do my best to arrange it," Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. "Though I am not sure I have that much control over the matter." "Then we will take what we can get and make the most of every day," Theresa said. "That is what we have always done." "That is what we have always done," Samuel agreed. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges and joys. Lucy went east for her education, writing long letters home about her studies and her experiences. She returned 3 years later with her veterinary certificate and set up practice in Shoshone City, the first female veterinarian in the territory. She was brilliant and dedicated, and she quickly earned the respect of even the most skeptical ranchers. James married a sweet-natured young woman named Emily from a neighboring ranch, and they built a small house on Sullivan land. Within a year, they had given Samuel and Theresa their first grandchild, a boy they named Samuel after his grandfather. Samuel, now in his mid-50s, found that being a grandfather brought him even more joy than he had anticipated. Michael, true to his interests, began developing a horse breeding program that brought in additional income for the ranch. He had an eye for quality stock, and horses bred at the Sullivan Ranch became sought after throughout the territory. Samuel and Theresa watched their children build their own lives with pride and occasional wistfulness for the days when they were small. But they also found new freedoms and pleasures in this phase of their life. They took their annual trips, sometimes alone and sometimes with the whole family. They became pillars of their community, respected and loved by nearly everyone who knew them. On their 25th anniversary, the whole town threw them a celebration. It seemed like everyone in Shoshone City turned out to honor the couple who had become a symbol of enduring love. Samuel gave a short speech, uncomfortable with the attention but wanting to acknowledge the community that had supported them. 25 years ago, he said, standing with Theresa beside him, I was a lonely man with a struggling ranch and no real hope for the future. Then one December day, I found a woman half frozen in a field. I carried her home and she lived, and she changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. Everything good in my life today traces back to that moment, to that choice to stop and help a stranger. So I guess the lesson is this: always stop to help. Always choose kindness. You never know what might come of it. The crowd applauded and Theresa wiped tears from her eyes. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it simple. Samuel says he saved me that day, and he did. But he also saved me every day after that, in small ways and large ones. He gave me a home and a family and a life worth living, and I hope I have done the same for him. That is what marriage is, I think. Saving each other over and over until it becomes as natural as breathing. More applause, and then the party began in earnest. There was food and music and dancing, and Samuel and Theresa moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes from what seemed like hundreds of people. Late in the evening, as the party finally wound down, Samuel and Theresa slipped away to their wagon. They drove home in comfortable silence, both exhausted but content. 25 years, Samuel said as they neared the ranch. A quarter of a century. It feels like both forever and no time at all, Theresa said. How is that possible? I do not know. Time is strange that way. They arrived home to find James had left a lamp burning in the window for them, a welcoming light in the darkness. They went inside and prepared for bed, and when they lay down together, Samuel felt the familiar sense of rightness that he always felt with Theresa in his arms. "You remember what you said to me?" he asked quietly. "When you first woke up after I found you." "I remember," Theresa said. "I said I was yours if you wanted me." "And I want you," Samuel said, "just as much now as I did then, more probably." "Good," Theresa said, "because you are stuck with me. I am not going anywhere. Promise?" Samuel asked, suddenly serious. "I promise," Theresa said, hearing the vulnerability in his voice. "Samuel, we are both healthy and strong. We have years ahead of us still. You are not going to lose me." "I know," Samuel said, "but sometimes I think about how close I came to never finding you or finding you too late. It makes me want to hold on tight and never let go." "Then hold on," Theresa said simply. "I am right here. I always will be." Samuel did hold on, wrapping his arms around his wife and feeling her heartbeat against his chest. He thought about all the years they had shared, all the moments both mundane and extraordinary. He thought about the life they had built, the children they had raised, the love that had grown from such unlikely seeds. And he thought about the future, however long or short it might be, and he knew that whatever came, they would face it together. Just as they always had, just as they always would. They fell asleep like that, holding each other tight, two people who had saved each other and built a life together, who had turned desperation into joy and loneliness into love. It was not a fairy tale with magic and perfect happiness. It was something better, real and hard-won and absolutely true. The years continued to pass, bringing Samuel and Theresa into their 60s. They were grandparents several times over now, with James and Emily having 3 children, and Lucy eventually marrying a fellow veterinarian and having 2 more. Even Michael, the youngest, found love with a spirited woman who shared his passion for horses, and they were expecting their first child. Samuel's hair had gone completely gray, and Theresa's had streaks of silver throughout the dark strands. They moved a little slower than they once had, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But they were still healthy and active, still very much engaged in life. James had gradually taken over most of the ranch operations, with Samuel advising but no longer doing the heavy work. It was strange at first, stepping back from the labor that had defined his life for so long, but Samuel found unexpected pleasure in having more time. Time to sit on the porch with Theresa and watch the sunset. Time to play with his grandchildren. Time to simply be rather than always doing. On a cool October evening, as they sat together watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and orange, Theresa said, "Do you have any regrets? Looking back over your life, is there anything you wish you had done differently?" Samuel thought carefully before answering. "No major regrets. Small things, maybe. Times I was too stubborn or said something I should not have. But nothing big. Everything I did, every choice I made led me here. And here is exactly where I want to be." "Even the years before we met?" Theresa asked. "When you were alone, even those," Samuel said. "Because they taught me to appreciate what I have now. If I had not been lonely, I might not have recognized what a gift it was when you came into my life." "I was so afraid that day," Theresa said quietly. "When you found me and brought me here, I was afraid you might be cruel or take advantage. I was afraid I would have to marry you and discover you were a terrible person." "But," Samuel prompted, "but you were kind. You were gentle and respectful and good, and every day I learned something new about you that made me grateful I had taken that chance." "I am the one who should be grateful," Samuel said. "You took a chance on a gruff, lonely rancher who barely knew how to talk to people anymore. You saw something in me worth staying for." "I saw exactly what was there," Theresa said. "A good man who needed someone to share his life with. And I needed the same thing. We were lucky to find each other." "More than lucky," Samuel said. "Blessed." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and Samuel pulled a blanket over both their laps. Theresa leaned her head on his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You think about it much?" Theresa asked. "That day in the field?" "More as I get older," Samuel admitted. "I think about all the coincidences that had to line up perfectly. If the storm had come a day later, you would not have been lost. If I had checked the fences a day earlier or later, I would have missed you. If you had fallen 10 feet in either direction, I might not have seen you in the snow." "It gives me chills to think about," Theresa said. "All those tiny moments that could have changed everything." "But they did not," Samuel said firmly. "They happened exactly as they needed to. We found each other and we built this life together, and that is what matters." "Do you believe in fate?" Theresa asked. "That we were meant to find each other?" "I do not know," Samuel said honestly. "I like to think so. I like to believe that somewhere, somehow, it was always going to be us. But even if it was just chance, just random coincidence, I am grateful for it. Fate or luck or the grace of God, whatever brought us together, I am thankful for it every single day." "So am I," Theresa said softly. They stayed outside until the cold drove them in, then spent the evening by the fire with books and quiet conversation. It was a scene they had repeated countless times over their decades together, and it never grew old. Samuel looked up from his book to watch Theresa reading, her face illuminated by the firelight, and he felt the same surge of affection he had felt 20, 30 years before. "What?" Theresa asked, feeling his gaze. "Nothing. Just admiring my wife." "You do that a lot," Theresa observed with a smile. "I have a lot to admire," Samuel said simply. That night, as they prepared for bed, Samuel moved more slowly than usual. Theresa noticed and frowned with concern. "Are you all right? Is your back bothering you again?" "Just a little stiff," Samuel said. "Nothing to worry about." But over the next few days, the stiffness became pain, and the pain became severe enough that Theresa insisted on calling Lucy. Their daughter came immediately, examining her father with professional thoroughness. "It is not your back, Pa," she said finally. "I think there is something wrong with your heart. We need to get you to a real doctor, someone who has the right equipment to examine you properly." The news hit them all hard. Samuel protested that he was fine, that it was probably nothing, but Theresa and Lucy together were a formidable force. Within 2 days, They had Samuel in Denver seeing a specialist. The diagnosis was not good. Samuel's heart was failing, weakened by decades of hard work and the natural deterioration of age. The doctor was honest. Samuel might have a few years left or a few months. There was no way to know. The only certainty was that his time was limited. The trip back to Wyoming was somber. Samuel was quiet, processing this information about his own mortality. Theresa held his hand tightly, her face pale but composed. "We will get through this," she said firmly. "However much time we have, we will make it count." "I am not afraid of dying," Samuel said quietly. "I have lived a good life, a full life, but I am afraid of leaving you." Tears spilled down Theresa's cheeks. "Then do not. Stay with me as long as you can. Fight for every day." "I will," Samuel promised. "But Theresa, you need to promise me something too. Anything. When I am gone, you have to keep living. Really living, not just existing. You have to let the children take care of you, and you have to find joy wherever you can. Promise me you will not just give up." "I promise," Theresa said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. Back at the ranch, they gathered the family and told them the news. There were tears and protests and desperate suggestions of other doctors, other treatments, but Samuel was calm. "Listen to me, all of you," he said. "I am 68 years old. I have lived longer than my father or his father before him. I have seen my children grow up healthy and strong. I have grandchildren. I have had 40 years with the love of my life. That is more than most men get. I am grateful for all of it." "But Pa," James said, his voice breaking, "we are not ready to lose you." "You are never ready," Samuel said gently. "But you are strong enough to handle it, all of you. You will take care of each other and the ranch. You will remember what I taught you, not just about cattle and land, but about living with honor and kindness. And you will go on because that is what living people do." Over the next months, Samuel's condition slowly deteriorated. There were good days and bad days, and he made the most of every moment. He spent time with each of his children individually, sharing memories and advice and love. He played with his grandchildren, teaching them songs and telling them stories, and he spent every possible moment with Theresa. They took one last trip to the field where it all began, on a beautiful spring day when the wildflowers were in full bloom. Samuel moved slowly now, leaning on Theresa for support, but he insisted on making the journey. "Right here," he said when they reached the spot, his voice weaker than it once had been. "This is where you changed my life." "We changed each other's lives," Theresa corrected, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. "Samuel, I do not know how to do this, how to let you go." "You do not have to let me go," Samuel said. "I will always be with you, Theresa. In this land we built together, in our children and grandchildren, in every sunrise and sunset. Death cannot take that away." "I love you," Theresa said desperately. "I love you so much it feels like my heart will break." "I love you too," Samuel said. "More than I have words for. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, the absolute best thing, and I want you to remember that when I am gone. Remember that I died happy, having lived a life beyond my wildest dreams, all because of you." They held each other in that field for a long time, two people who had built a life together from the most unlikely beginning, who had turned desperation into love and loneliness into family. The wind blew softly through the grass, and birds sang in the distance, and the world continued its eternal turning. Samuel made it through the summer, growing weaker but still fighting to stay. He wanted to see one more fall, he said, one more winter. He wanted every moment he could steal from fate or chance or God. But on a quiet December morning, exactly 40 years and one day after he had found Theresa frozen in the field, Samuel Sullivan died peacefully in his sleep with his wife holding his hand. The funeral was enormous, with what seemed like half of Wyoming territory turning out to pay their respects. Samuel had touched many lives over his years, and people came from far and wide to honor him. They told stories about his kindness, his integrity, his dedication to his family and community. They celebrated a life well lived and a man deeply loved. Theresa stood through it all with dry eyes and a straight back. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her. She did not cry at the service or at the graveside. She stood like stone, accepting condolences and murmured sympathies with grace and dignity. It was only later, when everyone had gone, and she was alone in the house that had been theirs, that she finally broke. She sat in Samuel's chair by the fireplace and wept, great racking sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. She cried for the man she had loved, for the life they had shared, for all the tomorrows they would never have. But even in her grief, she remembered her promise. She would keep living. She would find joy again somehow. She would honor Samuel's memory by embracing the life he had given her, not by retreating from it. The days were hard at first. The house felt too empty, too quiet without Samuel's presence. But gradually, Theresa found her way forward. Her children visited often, bringing the grandchildren who filled the house with noise and laughter. She stayed involved with the ranch, advising James but trusting him to run things his own way. She maintained her friendships, particularly with Martha Green, who had become like a sister over the decades. And every year on December 11th, she walked out to that field and stood where Samuel had found her 41 years before. She spoke to him there, telling him about the grandchildren and the ranch and her life, telling him that she missed him every day but that she was keeping her promise. She was living, truly living, not just existing. Theresa lived another 15 years after Samuel's death, dying peacefully at the age of 83, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were, "Tell Samuel I am coming. Tell him I kept my promise." They buried her beside Samuel on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so blue and vast it seemed to go on forever. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and the years of their lives. But the Sullivan children added one more line, carved deep into the stone. They saved each other. And so the story of Samuel Sullivan and Theresa Emerson Sullivan passed into the history of that land, told and retold by generations that came after. The story of a lonely rancher who found a widow frozen in a field, who carried her home and gave her life. The story of a desperate woman who offered herself to a stranger and found love instead of mere survival. The story of a practical partnership that became one of the great love stories of their time. The ranch continued under James's management, then passed to his children and grandchildren after him. The land that Samuel and Theresa had worked so hard to build into something lasting remained in family hands, a legacy of their love and their labor. And every December, on the anniversary of that fateful day, someone from the Sullivan family would walk out to that field. They would stand in the spot where it all began and remember the story of their ancestors, the story of how love can grow from the most unlikely seeds, how hope can bloom in the deepest winter, how two broken people can make each other whole. The wind would blow across the Wyoming plains, carrying with it the scent of sage and snow, and the ghosts of Samuel and Theresa would smile, knowing that what they built together had lasted beyond their own brief time. They had created something that endured, something that would go on long after they were gone. They had created love. They had created family. They had created home. And that, in the end, was the greatest thing anyone could hope to leave behind.